Hello, welcome back to another episode of Learning VCV Rack. So, building on what we learned last time, we have our VCO attached to our VCA, which is going into our audio interface. So if we listen to that, it's a very simple sine wave, but it's not very pleasant to listen to because it's just a monotone. So let's route in our ADSR that's connected to our sequencer to give it a little bit more pleasant sounding. So now we can hear there's kind of a simple beat going on, and we'll use kind of some of these modules as we explore going forward. So today let's take a look at Grayscale. So Grayscale has 3 modules, an algorithm and 2 binary modules. Let's take a look at the algorithm. Algorithm's a sequencer similar to the Sequence 3 but with a bit different UI. So what we have going on is an 8-step sequencer. If you click this button, start, you can see this light appears, but nothing happens because the thing is not running because there's no clock being routed in. So an easy way to do a clock, I don't believe there's a clock in the base official modules, but you can create one with an LFO. So if you create an LFO and you route the square wave in to our clock and you turn up the pulse width all the way, now our square wave, if you can look at that in the scope, it's basically turn down the time, or turn up the time. You can kind of see it's spiky. It's basically a very large square wave that drops every once in a while. And this is fine for our clock. So we're going to route this clock in there. And now we can see our algorithm's actually sequencing. It's running through this step 1 all the way to step 8 in a fixed in a beat. So if we want the beat to be faster, let's turn up the LFO. That looks pretty good. Now you can turn on and off these patterns by clicking these buttons. So now we have it doing every other beat, and that's a stop and start button. So let's instead of using our sequencer 3, let's route our ADSR to that guy, and we can use this pattern button right here, pattern output right here, and that will output whatever the gate of whenever notes are on. So you can just kind of create your own sequence. So you can hear it there. Alright, so then in addition to the stop and start button, you have this loop and end button. So if you turn it to end and you click the stop button or start button, it will stop after the end. It won't loop. So pretty simple. If you click this button, it will go to random mode. So if you start it now, it's going to randomly play kind of all over the place and will never end, even though it's set to end. The sequence never ends because it's random. Now if you have all the notes on, random doesn't really sound that good, but if you turn like half the notes off, let's say, now you can see that there's rests. You can hear the rests. Let's also look at what's coming out of this guy. So you can see, let's get back off of random. So you can kind of see over here in the scope, we're getting gates. Let's loop it again. We're getting gates in a pretty continuous pattern. Now if we don't want it to be in gate mode and we just want it to give a momentary trigger, we can do this. And so this is not really great for an ADSR, but it's a spiky, it goes spiky high momentarily when this note is played, which is good for triggering some effects. Depends on what you're trying to do. So we'll leave it on trigger mode, and that's very similar when you right click here. This is the gate mode, trigger, retrigger, continuous. So this is gate or retrigger. Alright, so then you have more stuff down here. So 1 through 8 right here, these are outputs of when these specific notes are high. So let's say you wanted the ADSR to trigger just when note 1 was on. And you can hear it's playing just note 1. Or you could play it just when note 2 happens, or whatever. So you can imagine you have 8 banks of voices. You like maybe a kick drum, a snare, hi-hat, and so on, each routed to each of these 8 inputs. And therefore you can kind of set up your own beats or whatever you want to do. So that's what these 8 outputs do. Now let's take a look at this bottom row. So we have our clock, which we saw before. This right here, this is the clock output, which is identical, as far as I can tell, to the real clock. Maybe it's actually slightly, yeah, it's muted. It's not so high, but it's basically replicating the clock input. Pattern we already looked at. Now we have 3. We have these guys right here. So stop and start. Those are events when the machine stops and starts. So if I turn off loop mode, and it's only going to play when I click this button. Now what we'll see is, let's see, I might have the time set wrong. Yeah, you can see it goes spiky whenever I click start. Another easy way to, let's explore the state one first. So the state one it's a trigger to push this button automatically, to push start and stop automatically. So let's create another LFO, and then we'll assign a square wave to that guy, and he will turn on and off. Let's go back to our pattern. Whenever this LFO goes high, this guy's turning on and off. And you can see that there's an event. If you get lucky, the scope will catch it. And you can see it there. Sometimes the scope doesn't catch it. There it is. So this is an event whenever the machine is started. And likewise, this is an event whenever the sequence is stopped. All right, reset resets the pattern. So if you were to loop it, for example, and start it. So I'm turning up my LFO rates, and now it's only able to get to the first 4. If I turn it up even higher, it's only able to get to the first 2. A slower LFO, it's not going to do much. But let's imagine you have a pattern here. You know, so you can kind of create some interesting effects by resetting the device every once in a while based on some other trigger. Mode is a control voltage for this sequence and random. So if you wanted to switch between sequence and random mode based on some event, you can do that. So let's turn all that off, back to normal. So one thing you can do if you have 2 of these algorithm devices, so if we duplicate this guy, then you can actually connect them in sequence. So you can say, upon start, this event right here, let's start the machine over here. And both are not looping. So when I start this guy plays, and then this guy starts. Now he doesn't have a clock, so we need to route the clock into him. So you can see this guy plays. Now this guy's not rigged up, so you can imagine I could connect to another bank of this. Now I can't just go like this. It won't let me, because I can't easily OR these 2 gates together. But luckily Grayscale gave us another module, a logic module. So if you go over here and you go to binary, this is binary logic. So let's instead hook up the outputs to this binary logic module. Now what this is doing is it's ORing all of these inputs together. If you click this button, then it's going to NOR all the inputs together. So binary logic. So let's say this guy is going to go high when any of these inputs go high. So let's connect this one to the pattern of this guy and connect that one to the pattern of this guy. So now we click the start. So let's give it different patterns. And there you go. And of course, if you want to sequence it back and forth, you could say, okay, the stop of this guy goes in the start of this guy. So now you have an 16-step sequencer that's looping. And they're ORed together. Now, of course, you can do binary logic and NOR these things together. which means it's the output is high when none of the inputs are high. So kind of see that effect. It's probably easiest to do LFOs. So I think that's a good look at algorithm and its step sequencing power. So you can kind of set up some interesting chains using kind of these events and its output. Let's quickly look at setting up some LFO and see if we can showcase the NOR stuff. So that's our LFO 1. Here's our LFO 2. So you can see these are both LFO together. So these buttons mute the inputs. So we have our LFOs that are blinking. I don't know why that one's not blinking. Oh, that's because our pulse width is not. It's too high. So here we can hear that one or this one. Now if we hear them together, you can hear the crazy pattern. Now if you ignore them, now this gate is only high when neither of these are on, which gives a different pattern than this. So you can kind of do some interesting things with binary logic. You could probably hook it up to a VCO, although the results are going to be suspicious at best. So you can kind of create some weird effects. Because basically I'm using a VCO audio rate square wave to turn on and off to trigger my ADSR. Which is going to be really weird. Let's actually just listen to the ADSR directly, or this VCO directly. And this is being ORed with an LFO. Or NORD, rather. So no matter what kind of audio signal I pass in, a sine wave, a saw, it's just going to give me logic output. You know, it doesn't carry the harmonics of the input through because it's a logic module. All right, that's a good look at that. Let's turn this back to the way it was. Hook that up to our output there. Go there. All right. So binary, there's another module called binary squared. Binary squared is basically just two binary modules stacked on top of each other that are identical to what we saw over here. It's just now they only have 2 inputs instead of 6. So fairly simple. I won't run through that. All right. Let's get rid of all that. Let's look at one more module. So that's everything in Grayscale. Let's look at one more module, the cloud generator from E series, the E340 cloud generator. So this is a VCO. So instead of listening to our sine wave, let's listen to our cloud generator. Now remember, we're still routing through the ADSR in sequencer 3. If we disconnect that, this cloud generator is going to sound pretty much like our VCO did. You know, you can adjust the sound, adjust the pitch. But since it's hard to listen to just a sine wave without any harmonics, let's put back in our ADSR so it sounds a little bit more pleasant. So this is our pitch, just like we saw before with our VCO. Let's actually also look at the scope it so we can visually see what's going on. So you can see the coarse knob adjusts the frequency as expected. The fine knob, adjust the frequency finely. Nothing too special. So now we have an FM knob, which is very similar to what we saw before. So we can route in an LFO. Let's do a so that's very similar to what we saw before, this FMCV. Nothing too special there. Volts per octave, same thing we saw over here where it's volts per octave. Alright, so but we have some new controls. The new controls are spread. Let's listen to that. So you can kind of see what it's doing to the sine wave. At very low spread, it's kind of oscillating the volume. And kind of up here, it's kind of making the volume really nuts. Okay, that's that. And there's chaos. There's chaos BW, which is kind of adding a noise element to it, sounds like. To the chaos. And you have this density. Density is a bit easier to see, I believe, with the square wave, or the saw wave. So let's switch to the saw out. Take a look at that. So here it is on, let's turn this volume down more. Adjust the time so we can actually see it. So there's our saw wave. If we turn up the density, you can see it's like it's putting saws in the saw wave. And there's even more saws now. So let's listen to that a bit louder. That's chaos and chaos BW with our saw wave. Here's our spread. At low density. So you can create some kind of crazy sounds with it. Now, of course, you can use these CV controls to LFO any of this stuff if you really want to. So here I'm LFOing this chaos. Now, there's no amplitude like a attenuverter hooked up to this LFO, so you need a VCA or something to control the CV voltage level of this LFO. That's chaos. It's chaos BW being LFO'd. Kind of more subtle, harder to hear. Spread. Oops. Spread. That's pretty much it for this cloud generator. So just another VCO, but a little bit more fancy, more controls. And I think that will do us for E-Series and Grayscale. Thanks for watching. See you next time.